cuando sonaban las sirenas por los bombardeos, ya teníamos órdenes, todos los niños, de ponernos en fila y correr a un sótano. ¿Qué cosa? Entonces sonaban las sirenas, ya a un sótano, para proteger, porque los bombardeos no eran como ahora. Aquello era que veían los obuses y caían, y era muy diferente. Ahora apretar un botón y te desintegran. Pero en aquella época no, tenías que protegerte. Si caía la bomba ya, a lo mejor aquí no hacía nada, y el hueco quedaba allá. ¿Te das cuenta? Era muy diferente. Con tiza, en esas terrazas, hacíamos una carretera donde allá estaban los nacionales, los malos, y aquí éramos los buenos. Entonces íbamos con la bicicleta. Entonces si caíamos con la bicicleta, nos cogían prisioneros. Los contrarios, los malos, que eran otros niños, ¿no? Sí. Entonces generalmente siempre cada vez poníamos el camino más estrechito, formado con dos tizas, para que ya te pasaste, prisionero. Bueno, esos eran juegos, ¿no?
We took refuge in a city called Tangier in Morocco, North Africa. It's a town, city, across the Strait of Gibraltar. At that time, it was an international city, so there were a lot of refugees who were protected, and we were at the beach sunning, and we could hear and even sometimes see the convoys that were going through the Strait of Gibraltar, and sometimes there were also cannons going off. So we really could appreciate how lucky we were. My uncle, once he asked me to carry an attaché case with him. I'm going to the American legation. You follow me 10 paces behind with this attaché case. So I went. What did I know? I went with him. And then I learned that he was a spy. My mother made a scene. She said, why would you involve her, etc., etc. So that time, I did help a spy, although I was not a spy.
I was in intelligence and reconnaissance and intelligence, and that was excellence training because there was a great emphasis put on creeping and crawling and moving about without being noticed by the enemy. And also we had overhead artillery with live rounds to get used to shells flying over our heads, and machine gun fire over us while we were creeping and crawling. Yes, I think the training was excellent. One night, when we were sleeping, we heard boom, 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 boom. And we heard that German submarines were attacking our convoy. And it reminded me of some movie I had seen back home, because one of the soldiers said, we're going to be sunk, we'll be drowning like rats. And this officer came down and slapped him and said, get back in your bunk. And about all we lacked was for the soldier to say, thanks, I needed it.
How long did you serve?
2.5 years.
And where were you stationed?
Well, after California, France, and through the central part of Germany, and then Bavaria and Austria, all of us were concerned. Adolf Hitler was trying to conquer the world, of course, and he he'd been so successful with his Nazi army and military, and he had gobbled up France and Poland, and was invading Russia, was bombing the British Isles, and it just seemed like he couldn't be beaten, and we all just we expected to probably never come back. We were just really depressed about the whole thing because we just didn't have much to hope for.
Hello, my name is Olga Chigrinova, and this is my mother, Irina Chigrinova. It was terrible, really terrible, and a lot of people died at the front, were killed or died from starvation, and my mother's uncle died at the front, and his wife, uncle's wife, died from starvation, and they left a few small children, and relatives adopted these children, and my mother's family adopted a boy, and some other relatives adopted a girl.
My name is Ellie. I was born in Poland. We were deported to Russia because my father was a rich man. He owned a factory. So the Russians came in first. They came in at night with guns and took my father away. I never saw him again. 3 days later, the Russians came in and they took the whole family. And they took us in the cattle cars. 18 days and 18 nights. My mother got very sick, dysentery. People got very sick, and we just had to stay there and live off whatever we could find to eat. In 6 years, a lot of things happened. There is no end. The World War II really did it to me. They stole my childhood. They stole my childhood. I never managed to be a child and grow up normally. I didn't. I couldn't.
You know, the things that happen during a war are just people who normally would be quite okay and nice. You put them in a group like that, they all become beasts. And they would take babies, throw them up, catch them with the bayonet in the gun. Can you imagine that? Or they would shoot them against the wall. And we talked with people who had witnessed that in Rimini. I mean, things that you wouldn't believe normal people would do.
How much did people in Italy know about what the Germans were doing to the Jews?
The Germans were the best liars that you could find. They filled their trains, and you wonder why did all these Jews go? Because they told them, oh, you will have a fabulous life. You don't even have to take your clothing. We will have everything ready for you. And they told them all those fibs. And these people who had been chased around all over were glad finally somebody promising the promised land. And the trains were filled from Milano, Stazione Centrale, and they went through, I think, through Switzerland, all closed up. You did not know what they had in the train. People did not know what was happening. He lied so beautifully, nobody knew. Hitler managed to hide everything.
My name is Sal Bleiweiss. I was born December 24, 1928, Poland, and the city of LODZ, which went on Survivor Dollar, because they former star soccer player from Austria, Germany, Otto Gladstein, who was kind of a mentor, and told us that they want to build a one-person crematorium, but to make sure that never works, because one of us are going to be the first one to test it. It's in the concentration camps where they didn't get anything to eat. We used to eat bark, coal, snow, anything you could get your hands on. Because I've seen history, I've lived it. I've seen wars, I've been in it. Cannot buy experience for money. Like I said, education is the most important thing in your life.
He'd been selected for the gas chambers at one stage in Auschwitz. And he was being marched with a group of people to the gas chamber, but the gas chamber was still full. They had not unloaded the dead bodies, and so they had to wait. And so they marched them into one of the huts. There was a double line of guards, and they just pushed them into the huts. And as he went in, he was in the front row. As he went into this hut, he, just out of the corner of his eye, saw that there was a window open. And immediately, he dashed out and jumped through the window. And at that moment, the roll call for all the thousands of prisoners was just finishing, and thousands of prisoners were just streaming back to their own huts. And so he was able to lose himself in the crowd. The person behind him saw what he'd done and also went and jumped through the window. But the guards realized what was going on and shot him dead. Teaching is about small beginnings, how prejudices in a fairly minor way can escalate eventually into something much bigger.
I was born a Jew. I committed a crime. I was about 5 years old, and my dad put me on his shoulder and I saw Adolf Hitler speaking. That was my childhood. But my dad said, we're not going anywhere. If we live together. If we're going to die together. So I lost 285 people in my family. My brother they pulled him to the left, and my father tried to get him back. And one of the guards shot him. And the only thing he said is, God, I haven't done anything, I want to live. And then I found my mother. And she weighed about 50 pounds. And I thought that I killed her because she died in my arms on May 8, 1945, the day that the war ended. And I lived for 15 years. I thought that was me, but my mother's brother was with me there. And he said, he did everything in the world to try to save her, but she was too sick. She couldn't even digest the food. Never let anybody stop you from expressing your feeling and what you think. I used to tell them, you can break my body, but you can never break my mind.
To this day, you won't believe it, but my neighbor is Jewish, where I live. And he and I talk a lot about it. And I said to him not too long ago, my brother and I feel so guilty. And he said, no. He said, you don't have to feel guilty. You were just a child. And I said, yeah, but I do.
And you can't take that away from us. I said, my brother has nightmares sometimes, I do. So it's something that we should have never done, and it happened, and you know, what can I do as a child? And there were no men left hardly, and the ones that came back were pretty much depressed and injured, and they took a long time to recuperate. So the women were chosen to go into the rooms and pick up all the bricks and cut off all the cement.
My name is Bernadette Victoria Caesar Lee. I was born in Belgium. I lived in Germany for 5 years, right after the Second World War. When we crossed by train to go where my father had been assigned, it was still bombed. People were still very sad, very post-war mentality. But as a child, I never noticed that because people were feeling very guilty about the war. So they were extremely friendly towards us, and they only wanted one thing, is to have children from their side playing with children from, let's say, what we use in French, l'armée d'occupation, the occupying military, to keep an eye on Germany after the war. Still individualized entities, whereas here you are united. Yes. Oui. C'est avec grand plaisir que j'ai eu l'occasion de faire cette entrevue avec Myriam. Myriam ou Mariam?
Mariam.
Mariam et Jenny et Terence. Bonne chance et à bientôt à l'Alliance française.
My name is Stephen Gergat, police surveillance, and we were told that we have to leave our town within 48 hours. We were considered undesirable aliens because we had relatives in the United States. Followed it. It led us out of the forest into a clearing, and then we just walked down that hill. In the distance we could see the village and hear the evening church bell, and then my mother spoke some German and saw a farmer down the highway. That's how Hungary want to be independent, because they want to withdraw from the Warsaw Pact, and with that the Russian troops would leave the country. Well, this was not successful because of revolution lost, and the Russians came in huge numbers, and they started shooting and imprisoning people and doing a lot of damage to the nation. The farm in Germany, where's the castle? And then they directed us to the castle, and that's how we made it, just with our clothes and our bags.
My name is Heinz Fraunhofer. I was born on June 22nd, 1962, in a small village of Ostern in the region of Banat in Romania. When I was 10 years old, I moved with my parents to Germany, to the Black Forest. So it was a culture shock, but I was 10 years old, and my sisters were 2 years and 8 years younger than myself. So at that age it was relatively easy to fit. And for my parents, until today, they still speak their own German dialect. They hang out with all the people that have emigrated from that Romanian village and come to the same city in Germany, and they hardly have any local German friends. This is a typical immigration phenomenon which you have also here in the United States. 13 and 14 I went back twice to Romania.
Oh boy, this will take a little bit of time. Education in the formal sense, or in just learning things?
Let's go with the formal.
That's better. Yeah, I had a wonderful time in kindergarten. I can remember those half days. I went in the afternoon, and we had just a wonderful time in the paper and a bus that was built in our classroom. And I can still remember that, and paying my coupon, paying the ticket to get onto the bus, and it was a lovely time. Trouble started the next fall when for some reason they expected me to go to school not only in the afternoon but the morning as well, and I felt that was just overdoing it. So it turned out that after about 3 days of my absence in the morning, the principal came from the school, which is only down the block, and was looking for me. And I saw him at the door and immediately raced out the back door. He followed me through the house at the back door. He was racing after me. I was winning the race, but unfortunately I was barefoot and cut my foot on something, and he caught me. And there's where my formal education started.
We had to do like war exercises several times a year. I was very little and I already had to learn how to shoot a gun. And I definitely remember that you hold that here between your shoulder and then you shoot the thing and you almost fall back. And then we had to throw grenades.
There was a lot of miserable people here also, so it was a relatively big amount of people around the parliament, a lot of young people, maybe majority of them were students like maybe 4, maybe 3 years older than you. So, and this euphoria stopped in a minute when first trucks came from Ostankin and all trucks was full of people like bleeding. And there wasn't medication to help them, wasn't even doctors because nobody expected this scenario. So all we did just put some of them in the middle of parliament, I mean in the building of parliament. So, and after that people understand that maybe this is the end. Nobody knows exactly how much people was killed during October 3rd, October 4th, but at least 2,000. I think everybody agreed that at least 2,000 people was died eventually. And many of them were been killed just around this Ostankin. And one of my friends spent 4 hours. He just lay down under the big stone and wait until this nightmare will be end.
We didn't realize we were missing anything as children. You know, you don't dream like you want to go to Paris or something. You are fine. Although I was a strange child when I was about 5 years old. My godmother wanted to buy me something for my birthday, and I asked for a globe, you know, a big globe, which I had to carry across half of the country on a train because we were visiting my godmother far away. And I would be fascinated in just going with my finger around the globe and looking at the countries I would like to visit. And I was ridiculed massively by everybody because traveling in my part of the world was absolutely prohibitive. You could go to few communist countries, which I did, but traveling anywhere else beyond Iron Curtain was nearly impossible. You had to get some sort of it's hard to translate, but we didn't have a hard currency. There was no conversion. You couldn't convert your money, our money, to any kind of hard currency. So the central bank would have to give you some sort of supplement of hard currency. You would have to apply for it, and then you would have to get a visa, and then you could travel. But of course, communists had to go through those visas. So people who were not approved, who had some sort of blemish on their resume, they couldn't go. So traveling was like, you know, for dreamers.
My name is Father Kazimierz Ligenza. I was born in Poland, a little town called actually the town I was born in it's called Gorlice, but I grew up in the town called Bobowa. It's in south part of Poland. It was great to have, a Polish Pope, and for sure he brought a lot of sense of freedom. He even on our TV they had to present what he said, and what he said first was, "Do not be afraid." It was his first message to the whole world as a Pope. But we knew in Poland that he is also talking to his brothers and sisters in Poland, so giving us the courage, do not be afraid, because everything is going to change eventually. So it was big influence. It was actually very bad. I mean, in big cities, people were put in, people who were involved in solidarity, leaders in different parts of Poland, they were put in they were imprisoned and were in prison, were released, and so it was very, very exciting time and great memories.
My name is Małgorzata Sobala. I'm known as Gosia. There's a lot of stress and there was a lot of force. Lots of my friends became members of Solidarity. Very quickly it spread, and being chased by soldiers, beaten up, taken to jail. It was terrible. I mean, it was like a lockdown of the whole country. I mean, we had no transportation, we had no phones. We had to have permits if you traveled from one city to another. Our books were altered, censored, so the history books were not accurate with the facts. There were lots of things available at black market. I don't know how Polish people did this, but there was always black market going on, and there were always some things that people would get. It was like a tragedy for everybody in Poland. It was a very sad time for all of us.
Nikolai, this is my boss.
Okay, tell your phone.
Came to the U.S., did you identify yourself as a Russian or as a German?
He doesn't identify by anyone. So that's why he cut his name short. He doesn't want to be identified as Russian. So he used his name Gretsch. His original name is Gretsch. So he cut off the few words so they wouldn't know the name. Because by name you can find the person's origin. So by this way, he will not be identified as Russian.
Awesome. Can we? I also want to ask you, why did you change your name to Nicholas?
Why did I say what?
Why did you change his name? Used to be when he was born. He's German. His name is Edward Karsten.
Did you ever go over to East Berlin?
Yeah, as part of our military duty, they had the four powers were divided up, and they had supposed to have equal access to all four areas of it. So after the wall was built, the Americans had a recon that went over to East Berlin 5 times a day. They had a driver drove a car, and they had a sergeant or an officer one that rode with that driver. And he drove around for 2 hours over there, just riding around, see what he saw. And you'd ride with him. You didn't know where he was going. He only knew where he was going. And I remember one evening being over with him in the middle of the night, and we were riding around, and all of a sudden, all the tires were squealing on the car, and he turned around and he just, I don't know how fast he was going, but he was flying, getting out of there. And I asked him what was going on, and he said, "Don't worry about it."
If you were in the military, was you went through Checkpoint Charlie. And it was basically, you know, these two lanes with a booth in the middle and arms that let you down and that go up and down to let vehicles in and out. On the American side, it's very regular. But at that point, you're passing through the wall. You're passing, you know, through the Berlin Wall. And on the other side are the Russian soldiers. And these guys don't have the Kalashnikovs that they had whenever I was, you know, going through at Helmstadt. They have these big 50 caliber automatic weapons, right? And these are like, you know, mounted on pillars, and takes two hands to hold them, right? And it's like something they might shoot out of a helicopter. And the barrels are really long, and the bullets, you know, would look like this. I mean, a 50 caliber bullet actually is probably about that long, right? And the whole reason that they're there are to shoot the trucks and that might try and run through the gate, not from the American side getting in, but from the German side getting out. But as you're walking across and you're on the sidewalk, there's these holes all over the place. You see holes in the walls, you see holes in the ground, and you know, it's because the Russians shoot at whomever tries to come through. And rule number 2 that they give you in the briefing as you go in is if you hear shooting, hit the ground and get behind these designated, you know, places.
Many things were changing at the time. The working spouse, what impact would that have on the mobility of moving people? Social issues of how do we create jobs for the spouse? Sometimes she's making more than her husband. I was enlisted in that job in 1980, and I went to work for BDM Corporation. There I did studies on the Soviet forces that were still in Germany. I'm through in the Warsaw Pact. That was before the wall came down. And I studied the nuclear release procedure. Did it with ready forces. We had 6 aircraft loaded with nuclear weapons on 15-minute response time. We had 6 aircraft loaded with air-to-air missiles and guns that were ready to take on the air threat, and they were on 5-minute alert. And we proved time and time again that we could meet those response times. We maintain our readiness through training exercises and inspection.
Yes, I was born in a little village in the central part of Greece, and I spent all the years of the elementary school there. It was a little school. In the same room we had 6 classes and 1 teacher. And after that I spent also 2 years in the high school in the mountains. And I had to walk every day 2 to 3 hours to go to high school. And it was the second year of my high school when the dictatorship came into power. Yeah, I remember I was 14 years old and I was coming back from high school, and I listened to the radio because in the mountains, you know, we were isolated. So I listened to the radio that dictatorship took over the Greek government, and essentially it was a shocking news. It was pretty fast.
Christine Ellicott about her first-hand experience in the Paris student revolts of 1968.
I am French and was born and raised in Paris. Came to this country when I was about my mid-30s. I'm a musician. I had 4 siblings and was raised in an apartment in Paris. So during the May 68, I was like 12. At the beginning, we didn't think it was going to be anything else more than just students being rambunctious and wanting the world to hear from them. As the days progressed, it became more and more violent too. So there was a little bit of a tension. At the beginning, it was really the students being angry, and the students were getting tired of the authoritative attitudes of the teachers. They felt like they were not respected as much as they wanted to. And then by a few days later, then more and more all the workers, especially the minimum wage workers, started to join, especially the unions.
Can you tell us who you are?
Hello, my name is Mike Griffith.
Can you describe your travels in Eastern Europe?
In 1990, I was traveling through Europe. I started in western part of Europe and was going from town to town where they were holding conferences where I was studying engineering at the time. And I was able to rent a car in West Germany. And some of the conferences that we went to were actually going to be in the Eastern Bloc. This was 1990, before really the fall of the Soviet Empire and the fall of communism, and we were supposed to drive into Czechoslovakia and Poland and Eastern Germany.
Were you with anybody?
I was with my my professor, Dr. Duffy, and we were also accompanied by a Professor Lipkin from Georgia Tech and his student.
What were the people like?
The people are very friendly, and you're speaking of in the eastern part?
Yes.
Yes, they're very friendly, hardworking people. Not a lot, they're very poor, not a lot of money, not a lot of mean.
As a child, you know, how I felt sort of freedom. And I would say I felt more free during communism than afterwards. Like, for instance, as a girl, age 12, 13, 14, 15, my mom has never had any concerns for me playing outside, you know, on the streets, or going to a party and coming back home at 12 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock at night, alone or with other friends. Never.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, she would tell me, you know, be careful, or, you know, she would want to, of course, know where I am, etc., etc. But I also never felt frightened, sort of, you know, walking on the street. Well, try to do that, you know, here. It's just impossible. And so that was an incredible sense of freedom, you know, that...
but you don't recognize it until you lose it.
Yeah, of course. And so now you go to Eastern Europe, our country, Bulgaria, and you know there's like chains and you know
all windows are barred.
All windows are
people
barred.
Live
people have like double doors.
Yeah.
An iron door or whatever, steel
like
made
very
door.
Thick steel door.
And then the regular door from
which
socialism,
they used to have.
Right?
You know.
And you're like, you know, oh
essentially
my God,
people
you know, are we
live in a
really
prison.
Sort of
My name is Lydia, I guess American name, Lydia Shields, and I lived in America for 5 years. I was born in the early 80s in a country that does not exist anymore, the Soviet Union. I lived there almost all my life, so I'll share my experience with you. I was 7 years when it collapsed, and of course, conversation of my parents and my parents' life was in Soviet Union, so by their conversations and what happened, it was a really good place to live. Free education, free Medicare, free apartments, jobs were available to everyone. It was a really nice place to live. Of course, I don't know any international arena what Soviet Union looked like and how it acted, because I was little and my parents didn't know everything, but it was a nice place. But company and government kind of, so the system was worked out well. So if you have a job, if you work for the company, you get free living, free apartment. So if you changed all the time, your places, most Russians didn't move a lot like in America. You move here, depending on the job, every year, every 5 years, every 10 years, but in Russia you basically live where you was born, where your parents live. So it wasn't common.
Most of my interactions were in pubs. You know, when I'd be at a pub, listen to music. There were certain pubs that were designated as IRA pubs, but the music was great. So I would go to these pubs, and we would be there. And then again, somebody would come in and they'd make an announcement, you know, about, you know, we need to support the IRA, blah blah blah. And so, you know, when they passed around the hat, you gave them a pound, an Irish pound or something, and just, you know, let it go. You didn't want to be there and not participate in that sense, I guess. I could have done that, but God only knows what would have happened. So I was more interested in just watching and observing at the time and seeing what was going on. It was really kind of fascinating. At one side, it was scary as well. My son and daughter were over there with me, and there were a couple of kids who were clearly part of an IRA, you know, family, and they were looking for work. They were very poor, so I had them, you know, do work around the house I was renting. And my neighbors were very upset by this. They didn't like these kids in the first place because they were really poor, and the second part is they were considered to be troublemakers. And so I eventually taught them how to drive, which really helped them get a job later on. My neighbors were really upset at me for doing all this. They just, you know, really didn't like these kids. They didn't want anything to do with them. But the flip side is that sometime later, when some kids were bothering my children, on their way back from school, they would take the electric train down, and it was very dark in the wintertime, so they'd be walking down an alleyway back to the house. Some bigger kids were trying to bother my son especially, and these IRA kids come up and said, stay away from him.
What was the hardest aspect of life for you growing up with the tensions between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland?
Okay, well, I grew up in Northern Ireland where the Trouble was. The Troubles, which we called the war, Civil War, was mainly confined to the northern part of the country, which is Northern Ireland. And I did live there during the Troubles, and it was about 10 years, first 10 years of my life. And there was a lot of issues where there was armed policemen and soldiers. There were barricades on the roads. There were tanks on the road, and there was often explosions you could hear.
Well, I think the public were excited even before she joined the royal family. My first impression was she was so young. I mean, I'd grown up knowing Charles, or knowing him, but, you know, of him. And he was 32 at the time. So for this 32-year-old man to be dating a 19-year-old was a bit of a shock for everybody. Well, I think everyone felt that it was fairy tale time. You know, I mean, little girls grow up and they think, oh, I want to be a princess, or they like to play games of being the princess and so on. And here was this, if you're not royal, you're called a commoner. But she's not actually. Princess Di's has royal blood going back many years, and some would say that she was actually more royal than Prince Charles was. That's a whole other story. In the context of the royal family, and, you know, a lot of countries don't have a royal family, and they sort of envy us having a royal family. I don't know how many royal families there are in the world, but not so many. But it's just one of those institutions that you're glad you have and you want it to continue. So that's sort of a sadness. I think that's how it affects me, a sadness that that they could possibly one day disappear.
you.